Let's talk about the 3 reasons why you may always be hungry. That is, this incessant hunger where you just can't seem to get enough. So I've seen this so many times over the years. Somebody says has a breakfast, maybe of oatmeal and a banana or breakfast cereal and skim milk at 7 a.m. and at 8:30 or 9 they're hungry. Not a little bit, but really ravenously hungry. They have a snack. 11 o'clock rolls around. They're hungry again, counting the minutes to lunch. They have their lunch, and then they're hungry again at 1:30 or 2. And this happens to so many people. But why is this? Another common situation. You have a big bowl of pasta. You're filled to bursting, right? And you're emptying your plate into the garbage, you're cleaning the dishes, but you're still hungry. You're filled to bursting, but you're still hungry. A very unnatural situation. How about people who signed up for all-you-can-eat food buffets and feed themselves till they're painfully full, sleepy, and feeling awful about themselves? Why does this all happen? Well, a good number of reasons, but 3 primary reasons. One is you've been told to reduce the intake of fat, specifically total fat and saturated fat, which is absurd. This is ridiculous. It's based on poor evidence from the 1950s and 1960s that never did show that fat caused heart disease, nor did it show that reduction of fat intake or saturated fat intake reduced cardiovascular risk. It was a misinterpretation. It's been since misrepresented and used, and you're told such things, right? To cut your fat, cut your cholesterol, eat more healthy whole grains. What that does, when you don't get fat from butter, olive oil, fatty cuts of meat, full-fat dairy, cheeses, all those nice, wonderful fatty foods, when you don't get them, you're left hungry because fats are clearly very satiating. So you eat more butter, you have more bacon with your eggs, and have all the eggs you want, by the way. You're satiated, and you're satiated for a prolonged period of time. So if you did have, let's say, 2 or 3 eggs in an omelet, or fried eggs, maybe some sausage, and maybe some full-fat cream or half and half in your coffee, and you do that at 7 a.m., you likely won't be hungry, if you do these and other strategies, till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, maybe not at all, or till dinner. So it's a very different experience when you stop limiting fat. And when you limit fat, you have to replace the calories with something, right? You got to eat something. Well, most people replace them with carbohydrate foods in some form. Might be grains, for instance. It could be bagels or bread or breakfast cereals. Well, that causes a cycle of high blood glucose that's followed by low blood glucose. So let's say you had that bowl of oatmeal or bowl of cornflakes or whatever, and your blood glucose goes from, say, 100 milligrams to 170 milligrams, which is very common. And then because that high blood glucose obliges your pancreas to over-respond with an insulin surge, your blood glucose drops. It plummets. So it drops from 170 maybe to 70. And that causes not just mind fog and anger and confusion and foggy thinking, it also causes ravenous hunger, typically in a 90 to 120 minute cycle. So cutting fat is awful. It makes food taste less good, it keeps you hungry all the time, and it causes you to gravitate towards foods that cause that cycle of hyperglycemia, high blood glucose, followed by hypoglycemia. Another reason is when you consume healthy whole grains or anything made of wheat and related grains, you get exposed to a protein called gliadin. And gliadin is not fully digestible by humans. We simply don't have the enzymes that break it down into single amino acids like we would, say, an egg or a piece of beef. Because the body needs to convert those proteins into amino acids to reconstruct your body, to make skin and bone and brain and other tissues. Well, when you eat something that contains the gliadin protein of wheat and related grains, you break it down to peptide fragments, not amino acids, peptide fragments that are typically 4 or 5 amino acids long. And these, while they're larger than single amino acids, they're still small enough they're able to penetrate into the brain through the blood-brain barrier, where they bind to opioid receptors, but they don't make you high, say like oxytocin or morphine might. Instead, they stimulate appetite. and they can stimulate appetite extravagantly. And so when you're exposed to gliadin-derived opioid peptides, it's a potent appetite stimulant. And add that to a diet that's low in fat, you have this huge stimulant for appetite, for eating more and more and more. And that's why when you fill up on that big bowl of pasta and you're filled to bursting, but you're still hungry. That's the gliadin-derived opioid peptide effect. Another effect that keeps you hungry is the loss of the gastrointestinal microbe Lactobacillus reuteri that I've been talking a lot about the last, 7-8 years. Because Lactobacillus reuteri is responsible for taking up residence in the entire length of the gastrointestinal tract. Very unusual, by the way. Most microbes, beneficial microbes, don't do that. Most microbes take up residence in a specific area like the colon, and other species in places like the mouth or the vagina or the skin. Lactobacillus reuteri is very unique in that it colonizes the entire gastrointestinal tract from mouth to anus, including the 24 feet of small intestine, where it sends a signal to the brain to release the hormone oxytocin. Now, you likely know the hormone oxytocin as the hormone of love and empathy, and it is that. And you will feel an increased intensification of love for people close to you, the desire for human companionship, an increased sense of generosity, increased acceptance of other people's opinions, my favorite of all. So there's that social and emotional aspect of oxytocin, but there's also an appetite suppressing effect, and specifically for what's called hedonic eating, or eating just for pleasure, not because you need it to live or to grow or to exist, to survive, but just for pleasure. That would be in the form of such things as cupcakes or muffins. Now, it's important to know that nearly all of us have lost Lactobacillus reuteri, and thereby its capacity to send that signal to your brain to release oxytocin that suppresses appetite for junk foods. So hedonic eating is an appetite for junk foods. Well, that goes away when you restore Lactobacillus reuteri, among its many other wonderful effects. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please refer to my other YouTube videos, my Defiant Health podcast, my WilliamDavisMD.com blog, my membership website, which is innercircle.drdavisinfinitehealth.com, where we talk about these things, live Zoom conversations, as well as oodles and tons of supportive educational materials. But loss of reuteri leads to loss of oxytocin or lower levels of oxytocin, and thereby an increase in appetite for snacking. Now, people say things like, well, if I pet my dog or hug my children, I get a surge in oxytocin. Yeah, for about a minute. We're talking about a surge in oxytocin that's around the clock and has much greater effects on your behavior, your appetite. Now, put all that together. That is, cutting fat and saturated fat, avoidance of the gliadin protein sources that yield opioid peptides that stimulate appetite, and the loss of reuteri, and thereby oxytocin and its appetite suppressing effects. And you can imagine that's why you're hungry all the time. So the solution is not counting calories, which makes it even more miserable, right? Because you're thinking about food, you're obsessing about food. So what's the solution? Well, if you know the causes, you know the solution. One solution would be don't limit fat. And not limiting fat does not cause heart disease. That is absurd. There are real causes for heart disease, and they're easy to identify. They're easy to reverse. It's easy to reverse coronary atherosclerosis, but don't count on the doctor to know, because he or she only subscribes to the pharma solutions and procedures in hospitals and related things. They won't know. In what world, by the way, are the purported experts not experts? They're experts in dispensing pharmaceuticals and procedures and other revenue-generating activities. They are not. Let's be clear on this. Doctors are not experts in health. I'm generalizing, of course. I'm talking most about mainstream doctors. There are many wonderful functional medicine doctors, chiropractors, naturopaths, others, health coaches. But the average mainstream doctor has no knowledge nor interest in your health, except insofar as it involves hospitals, procedures, and drugs. So, not limiting fat is the first step. Next step is to eliminate sources of the gliadin protein and thereby gliadin-derived opioid peptides. wheat, and grains. It helps to eliminate sugar also, that has effects too. But the big culprit is wheat and grains because those are foods we're told you should eat more of every day, every meal, under the guise that it's healthy for you. It is not. Grains were a huge mistake in the human diet that got started 10,000 years ago. The irony is, of course, that despite that, conventional sources of dietary wisdom tell you eat more of it. That's horrible advice that essentially destroys your capacity to control your appetite and other aspects of health. And then lastly, restoration of Lactobacillus rhodori. Now, we like to do it as a yogurt. It's not yogurt, of course. It looks and smells like yogurt, but it's not yogurt. Yogurt in the store is something entirely different. We're going to ferment dairy or other things like coconut milk and other foods with Lactobacillus rhodori. We do that because it amplifies counts about 1,000-fold. And when we quantify the number of microbes in this specific way of making yogurt using prolonged fermentation and the addition of prebiotic fibers to nourish microbes, we get around 300 billion counts of rhodori per half cup or 120 milliliter serving. And that is likely why you get an even bigger effect in surging oxytocin. So you get all the social and emotional benefits, you get body composition benefits, you get hormonal benefits, and you are no longer interested in snacking. So people who follow these ideas find themselves wonderfully free of the tyranny of food and appetite. You may have breakfast at 7, and then you didn't even think about food, probably till 2 or 3 or maybe even 5 or 6 p.m. We forget to eat lunch or are not interested in having lunch. Now recognize this is not the same as purposeful calorie restriction. That's something entirely different. Then maybe you have dinner, and that's it. So most of us eat about twice a day or 2 main meals and 1 small meal. Some people go at 1 meal a day. So eat when you're hungry. That seems ridiculously simple, doesn't it? Eat when you're hungry. And hunger, by the way, will be a very different experience. It won't be the gnawing, desperate hunger that people who don't do these things will have. That's the kind of hunger you have where you wake up in the morning, you're ravenous, and you're hungry at noon, you're rude to the waiter or waitress at the restaurant because your food took more than 10 minutes to deliver, or you're angry because you're in the line and getting your clamshell of food at a drive-in window. All the crazy behaviors of modern people. It's not your fault. It's the fault of bad advice, ultra-processed foods, and all the other blunders we've made in diet. So know that you have extravagant, magnificent control over appetite and impulse, and you don't need a drug to do it. You don't need mantras. You don't need a smartphone app. You just need to recognize the 3 things that drive appetite in the modern people and reverse it.